Three, two, one, here we go. Hello, everyone. I'm Brian the Rain Man Lucas. Welcome to RAINMAN'S Take, observations on the world we live in. We're going to take a deeper dive into topics of interest to me, including politics, current events, history, popular culture, and social issues. You'll find the diversity of topics refreshing. In our clickbait, soundbite society, we rarely get the whole story. RAINMAN'S Take interviews interesting people as well as peeling back the onion on specific topics, all with the goal of getting people to think more deeply about a subject. Hey everybody, it's the Rain Man. Welcome back to RAINMAN'S Take. I want to introduce my guest today, my friend Steve. Steve is currently training in the discipline of shamanism, and I find that fascinating, and I wanted to get Steve on to talk a little bit about it. So, Steve, how you doing today?
I'm good. Thank you for having me.
Very cool. Very cool. Why don't we get right into it? Why don't you tell me a little bit about how your journey started, and kind of we'll take it from there.
Yeah. I think for the sake of this conversation, really what's important is sort of my spiritual journey and how I ended up in the world of shamanism. So we moved here to Encinitas from Las Vegas about 10 years ago. And moving here is, for me, it was a little like coming to Harry Potter land. Had no idea at the time how spiritual this place was and how many practitioners, how many, sort of amazingly powerful spiritual people that are here. When I sort of got my first taste, I was immediately hooked. If it existed, I tried it. I wanted to be certified in it. I've done a lot of different modalities over that time. It was about 4.5 years ago that I met my current teacher, Marty Spiegelman, and started receiving initiation and mentoring into shamanism. And it's really where everything I have done has landed for me. There's something about this particular discipline that's it's magical, it's powerful, it's also very grounded, it's very practical. And yeah, it's changed my life. It's changed the way I work with clients, with my Sacred Truth business, the Sacred Truth. And yeah, it's just been a really, really cool journey.
And for people who may not know what that is, what is shamanism?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's a good place to start, because I think it's something there can be quite a bit of confusion over. I know before I sort of really got into it, I certainly was confused about it. And I think the confusion comes in that people mistake shamans for the practice that shamans do. And I was trying to think of a good analogy. It's a little like saying a gymnast is somebody who's good at the balance beam. And while a gymnast might do the balance beam, they might not. And what a gymnast is really is somebody who has dedicated their life to mastering physical strength, mastering intent, focus, precision, awareness of their body and space. And they use those in different disciplines, which may or may not be the balance beam. And so what shamans really are masters of consciousness. And we spend our entire lives focusing on training our awareness, focus on training things like intent and personal power. And then we use those throughout our lives. And sometimes that's in things that are sort of more commonly known as shamanic practices. And sometimes it's, in our human relationships and our day-to-day lives, in business, in grocery shopping, all kinds of things.
Yeah. And so when you have a client within the Sacred Truth that you were just mentioning, what exactly are you doing with them?
Yeah, that's a good question. So there's a sort of two different wings to my business, two different arms, so to speak, and they feed into each other. So one is essentially spiritual counseling. It's going to be, for most people, much like sort of traditional counseling would be. We'll deal with relationship, love, money, career, success, sort of the big things. But we'll deal with it both from a spiritual perspective, meaning sort of, why is this thing showing up? What's the roots of it? What does this mean for your overall growth and development as a spiritual being? So not just the sort of the practical aspect of, should I take this job or not? How does this impact you on a greater level? But both the spiritual counseling and also the healing work I do, we also address things at an energetic level too. So it's it's in essence kind of, if we're trying to release something, getting to that taproot and being able to release it at that level rather than just popping the head off and the thing keeps growing back. So again, they can be separate, but they typically kind of feed each other. So the spiritual counseling is sort of addressing more of how things are showing up practically. And the healing work is kind of addressing the energetic component that's sort of manifesting this issue.
Gotcha. And I know very little about it, and watching a couple of programs about just kind of the basics of shamanism. You always think of shamans as kind of like witch doctors, or and they always talk about, you know, trying to connect to a different plane of consciousness. How do you do what does your training entail to do that?
Yeah, it's essentially what I had mentioned before. It's awareness practice. So that's one of the sort of core things is training your awareness to work like a very precise, honed, and powerful tool. And there's also, both through the initiations and practices we do, a lot of work with personal power to be able to access and reach and work with those higher realms. We don't typically do things like ayahuasca or things like, at least in my lineage, I'm initiated in the Andean lineage. I should mention that, and I should also mention my teacher is Marty Spiegelman, and her program is Shaman's Light. She's brilliant. So we don't typically do things like, you know, drumming to produce a trance state for hours on end, or some of the things that sometimes you'll see certain lineages do or certain practices do. But yeah, I think I answered your question.
And that's interesting, because that's what, and I definitely want to get into at some point, talking a little bit about the ayahuasca, that plant-based chemical that those other lineages do. What I would probably just throw it out there right now, but if somebody wanted to get a hold of you or get a hold of your teacher or learn more about her and you, are there websites, or where might they be able to go?
Yeah, very nice. So my website is thesacredtruth.com. Okay. And my teacher is Marty Spiegelman, and her program is Shaman's Light. And she has websites for those as well.
Okay, very cool. Very cool. Yeah, obviously the shows that I'm referring to, they talk about kind of the ancient wisdoms that these shamans were trying to interact with. So you've been going through your journey for the last, you said 4 years, 5 years?
Yeah, somewhere in there. Yeah.
Now, is there an end to it, or are you just constantly in a state of learning and honing skills? Yeah.
There's definitely no end. This is a life journey, and you know, there's always sort of more to reach for and more to experience, and you know, greater levels of power we can achieve. And so yeah, it's definitely if it sinks your teeth in you, you're in it for the long haul.
And I've been over to where Steve is talking to me from, is one of his on his property, is one of his areas where I assume you deal with clients, but you've got two of them. I definitely want to get into those down the road because they're amazing. But real quick, just right over your left shoulder, what is that?
So that is a Dreamcatcher. And it's something, it was a gift from my lovely wife, actually. And it's just a really beautiful piece. I can't remember the artist. I should plug her, because she does amazing work. Maybe I'll put it in the notes.
And that's the other thing, you know, I would assume when people hear shaman, they immediately think of like Native Americans and that sort of thing. And that's obviously what you're doing there. Talk to me about the Andean lineage that you're studying. How is that different from some of the other lineages out there, or other disciplines out there?
Yeah, it's a good point. People do often think of things like the Native Americans, but really shamans have existed in every indigenous culture for thousands of years. And you know, you think of them like witch doctors. They often were the healers. they were also storytellers and record keepers. And, they were the sage that, the tribe members would come to determine, do we go to war? How do we, what do we need to plant? When do we plant it? How do we fix this issue in our community? So they've served a lot of different purposes in communities for, like I said, thousands and thousands of years. The lineage that I've been initiated into primarily is the Andean lineage. My teacher has received initiations in several, the Dagra tradition in Africa being one, the Himalayan traditions. There's lots of incredibly powerful shamanic lineages. I think why she landed on this one is the Andes is a really, really magical place. It's a very powerful place. The land there, the geographies in which this power is held is remarkable. And it's a place where there's this unbroken lineage of wisdom that's been passed on and added to, from one shaman to another, to another, to another. And, I'm blessed to be sort of becoming a link in that chain. And the beauty of it is, while the core of this teaching is ancient, it's still incredibly practical for modern humans. So I think that's an important piece too. We do this training, we perform these practices really to be good humans today, to help try and solve the big problems the world is facing, to have good relationships, to if we're in business, to be investing in the right products, or to realize which products need to be dissolved and moved away from. So yeah, this one in particular, this lineage in particular, is just really powerful for our Western culture here.
Yeah, and you said it early on, where we live here in Encinitas. Very, very popular, these types of disciplines, and just, for a lack of a better way to describe it, just kind of alternative ways of looking at things. Because some may argue that our modern culture is even less advanced than the ancients were, because we've gotten so far away from this sort of underlying invisible energy that it seems like a lot of these types of disciplines are trying to tap back into it. And definitely, especially around here, has got a huge audience. How big is, how many people are in that lineage in general? And then when you do trainings, how many people are with you?
Yeah, I wouldn't even know how to go about answering the first question. Our group works with somewhere around a half a dozen or so shamans in the Andes, maybe a bit more than that. But there are lots of shamans in the Andes. So I don't even know how I'd go about answering that one. But my teaching tends to go in relatively small groups. And it's kind of like high school or college, where you graduate with that group from year to year, and you tend to stick with them. And then at a certain point, start interacting with the larger Shaman's Light audience. So there's 4 in my group, and really cool people and really cool transformations from all walks of life. There's a tech guy and a doctor and an educator and a magical woo-woo woman and me. So it's cool. It's been a cool journey with them.
Nice. One of the other things that this television show that I was watching the other day, just kind of to prep for this, it was kind of basically saying, this is not something that you just sort of one day say, oh, I might be interested in this. It's more like at some point way back in your past history that you kind of decide that, hey, at least maybe not conscious of it back then, but something was kind of pointing you in this direction. Is that the case with you personally? And you don't have to answer it if you don't want to, but do you find that with all the other trainees within your little group, are they just coming to it now just because they're interested in it now, or has it kind of been something that has been building in their personal lives?
Yeah, I definitely think this is something that is planted in you from birth, really. I wouldn't have known the words for it for a long time. It wasn't until I got here that, that the idea of shamanism even was sort of planted in my awareness. And then it took me 6 years to even find the teacher to do it with. Yeah. To a certain extent, I think I was a bit scared of it. I think if you find a true, authentic teacher, you sense the power in the teaching. And so it's even signing up is kind of going through a big gateway. So yeah, I think that the show is very accurate, that this isn't something that you would just sort of stumble into. You have to really want it. And then, have to have the courage and have done enough work to sign up for it and to stick with it. It's not an easy path.
And the path is the reward. I mean, that seems to be the,
it is.
That rings true. It seems like in everything. So, So, talk to me about, because I know you've done at least one trip down to Peru. Yep. Talk to me about that. How was it? What did you do down there?
Well, it was both magical and amazing, and on some levels, one of the hardest things I have ever done. It's another world. I mean, that's kind of a sort of silly thing to say, but it really is. And, the things that my group, through my teacher, are able to experience, there's really not anything in our everyday world that you can point to and say, oh yeah, this is like that thing I did that one time. And it really kind of shakes you. It's things that are so sort of at times unbelievable, that your psyche wants to say, no, I think somebody's making this up.
As an example, what would be an example of that?
Well, just things like the rituals that we did, the connection that we have with the spirit there, spirits, the power of the lands, it's not like anything that you experience in everyday life. And so on some level that was jarring, and because it was jarring and so powerful, it was also really great. It really does sort of crack you open to what more is out there and what more is possible. And that's kind of what we need. We need to have a teacher, a mentor, an experience that sort of safely but powerfully kind of cracks us open. And that's what allows us deeper levels of consciousness, higher levels of awareness, more powerful, more profound experiences.
Yeah. And, it's amazing because at least my view of it, having talked to you in the past and just kind of realizing that there's a lot more out there than what our modern world is telling us. You figure the Catholic Church has been, and just church, the institution of church for the last 2,000 years has tried so hard to separate people from the earth and from whereas before that, that's all it was. It was people connected to the earth and connected to those spirits and the spirit realm and those different dimensions of knowledge. Down there in Peru, I assume Peru is probably predominantly Catholic. Did you ever see any type of conflict between the shamans and the institutional Catholic Church down there?
No, the indigenous cultures are very inclusive, and in fact, there were lots of instances where you saw those two things married. That it doesn't have to be one versus the other in their view, that they hold and maintain the same level of connection to the land, the same level of connection to the spirits that they've always been connected to. And hey, there's this other thing. Okay, great. Let's do that too. So yeah, it was at least the things that I experienced. That's not a conflict there.
Interesting. So tell me a little bit more about the trip down there. How long were you down there for? Kind of what were the big takeaways from it?
We were there for about 2 weeks, kind of a bit all over. We were, largely stationed in Cusco, although we sort of bounced around a lot. We ended up 3 nights, I believe, camping. the takeaway in a sense was, oh shit. I'm not sure if I can say that, but this is so much more real and so much bigger than I had any concept of. And that's saying a lot, because the things that I have experienced here in North America with my teacher are big and profound. And so it really was cracking open a level of awareness of what truly is available to us. If we put in the work to get ourselves to the level of consciousness to reach those experiences.
What, and I imagine somebody like me who's just been completely initiated into the modern world, that probably takes a little bit of time. I mean, talking to you and talking to other people who are into these type of disciplines, I find myself thinking, like, I wonder what I would do if I ever saw a ghost. I wonder if the ghost would even want to talk to me. I find myself wondering that. What are you? I mean, how do you help people sort of detach from, try to tap back into their natural or spiritual self? What types of things you guys work on?
Well, I mean, you implied it earlier. One of the biggest things that we're focused on doing is returning back to the earth. We are distanced from it probably more than ever in the history of our devices, our technology. That these things are removing us from this sort of true authentic power and belonging, and so much of what we do, we're not certainly anti-cell phone, but so much of what we do is really trying to spend the time reconnecting like we were. And that also really cracks you open, that there's a level of consciousness that even these simple exercises of, sitting under a tree, for an hour, trying to not have any thoughts in your head, will do. So, if somebody was interested in this path, essentially that's where you start, is really sort of kind of unwiring a bit from our Western culture and rewiring, those indigenous roots that are still within us.
Yeah, man, you just gotta find them. I mean, I have trouble sitting down for 5 minutes and trying not to think about things. I mean, it's difficult, Anyway, all right, I think it's time we talk about it. The pit of enlightenment. What is, first of all, I'll describe it in a second, but what's your official name for it?
I don't know if it has a name. It's been called a lot of things. I typically will refer to it as the well. I think you've called it the Cistern of Enlightenment. My mom came up with the term the Cistern Chapel, which is brilliant.
Yes.
It is kind of a mystery, and there's part of me that thinks that's sort of why no names actually really stick to it.
Gotcha. All right, so allow me to do this, because I've actually been in this thing before, and it is unbelievable. So where Steve lives, in his backyard, there was a old concrete cistern that's probably 12 feet in diameter.
It's 13 actually.
13 feet in diameter and probably 20 feet deep.
I think I measured it at 17 when I got to the bottom of it.
So this thing is amazing. And the owner of the property before Steve actually built this thing whenever he did. But when Steve bought the property, that cistern was essentially completely full of 50 or 60 years of just garbage and trash. And so it was Zen and the art of cleaning out the cistern, to the point where now he's got a beautiful wooden roof on it, a beautiful kind of arched door, a staircase, a ladder going down, a small table/altar down there. It is the most unbelievable thing I've ever seen, especially since I saw it before it happened. So a couple things. Talk to me a little bit about that. What do you use that for? And then we'll talk about the ceiling and how you've got the ceiling set up.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. When I started, you're right. It was literally full of trash. And I had no idea how deep it was going to be. I sort of figured maybe I would get to 6, 7, 8 feet, and it just kept going and going. And when I hit the bottom, it was about 17 feet below the surface. It really is a remarkable space. I didn't quite even 100% know what I was going to do with it. I just had the sense that, okay, step one is to clear it out. You could feel it was a very powerful spot on the land. When you walk past it, you could feel the draw to it. What I do now, I do a lot of my shamanic practices in there. It's the space where I do all of my energy work with clients. So lots of energy clearings in there. It's a place where I like to go be in pitch black, like pitch black, so black that if you're in there for an hour, you're not going to see your hand in front of your face. Like there's no light in it. And it's almost soundproof. It's not quite, but pretty close. And so even that, I think, adds to the specialness of it. We don't get a chance to be in isolation like that. We're so constantly bombarded with sounds and noise and light. And so even just being able to be in the dark like that is—
What is that like?
An experience. It's great. It was, I will say, the first time I got everything closed in and I closed the door and sat down there, it was a little unsettling.
In what way? It's like, you're like, what am I doing down here?
Yeah, well, it's just, being in the pitch black like that. And it from day one, was a very special and powerful and spiritual place. So it wasn't just like closing yourself in your bedroom door. You're about 12 feet underground when you're sitting on the bottom in a pitch black, essentially vortex. And it very much is the experience of being in another dimension. And so it's a little jarring at first. It's one of my favorite places to be now. So it took a little while for me to get used to it, for me to figure out what it wanted to be used for, what I was going to use it for. And I have no doubt that's going to evolve forever. And it's just a really unique, really special place. I feel, I never would have A, thought to build it, or B, spent the money to build something like that. So to have it sort of there and have it unveil itself, it was just magic. It really was.
And that seems to be a popular thing. Here I've heard Joe Rogan talk about these sensory deprivation chambers, where you go and pay money and lie in a tub or whatever the case may be. When you built it, that's what you had in mind, right? Because didn't you do something with the ceiling to kind of help with that?
Well, yeah. I was certainly wanted it pitch black. That's something I knew right from the get-go. That's an experience that I wanted to create for a variety of reasons. And I was definitely hoping to have it soundproof. It's pretty close. And the other thing I did with the roof, there's an oculus, a circular oculus in the middle that can be opened, which allows you to both sort of work with sunlight, or if you're in there at night, to work with starlight. So that's a pretty special feature of the roof as well.
Nice. So what were some of the other reasons why you wanted it to be pitch black?
The level of power and the access to spirit in the pitch black is just more. It just is. And in the spiritual path, and in a lot of the work that I do, both on myself personally, which will probably happen forever, and in the work I do with clients, we're often needing to go to dark places in ourselves to confront the things that we have sort of pushed aside, but that sort of stick around as our shadows until we do have the sort of courage and capacity and support to bring those things to the light. And so there was something important to me, both in the depth and in the fact that we could do this work in the dark. it's beyond metaphor. That was an important quality of that space. And like you said, this is another space that I built where I do my spiritual counseling work, and it's amazing, and it's very high vibrational, and I love it in here as well. Yeah. And it's just, as you've experienced, they're just very, very different.
Yeah. Oh yeah. No, that the more and more I hear you talking about the Cistern Chapel, the more it just blows me away. I love it. So, and again, that's when you were talking about how you need it to be pitch black to really get into yourself. You think about it, all we've been taught since we were kids is to be afraid of the dark. Bad things happen in the dark, bad animals come out in the dark, fear of the dark. And now you're actually going into it too. Yeah. Well, what are reactions? What do people have in terms of reactions down there when you do that?
I mean, there's a variety of reactions. They all ultimately end up being positive. Mostly people are a bit in shock, and not totally necessarily just because you're, in pitch black. I allow people to acclimate themselves before I close us in. And sometimes I do work in candlelight there, so it's certainly not always pitch black, but there's a bit of a surrealness that this thing even exists in somebody's backyard. The way you walk up to it, you don't really see the door. You only see about 5-ish feet of it sticking out of ground. And then you open the door and it drops into this tunnel that's, about 17 feet deep. So it sort of everything about it is shocking is maybe too strong of a word, but it's a profound experience for people. The first time is it's very unexpected. And I think that's a good thing. I think it's important to have experiences like that in our lives where we get a little surprised and occasionally a bit uncomfortable.
Yeah. You had mentioned this earlier, and I definitely wanted to, and I wrote it down because I wanted to touch on it back right now. The whole idea of the ayahuasca, and that's not necessarily a part of your training, but early on, did you start the process just kind of focus strictly on the Andean lineage, or did you kind of have like a overarching sort of beginning stage, and then you sort of started focusing in on that, where you actually learned about those sorts of things or participated in those sorts of things?
Yeah, so it was probably about 6 years from the time I heard you should look into shamanism before I found my teacher, and in that time I certainly did a lot of reading and research, and looked into a lot of different things. Ayahuasca, it's probably, even though we don't do it, I think it's a good thing to talk about. As I said, it's not a part of our teaching. It's not a part of my practice or my teacher's practice. There's a lot of people, it's growing in popularity, and I think there's a lot of people who are interested in it, and a lot of people who would say they had very profound experiences. I think it's worth talking about, the side of why you may not consider that and consider a different route. And, there's a few things. One is things like ayahuasca or peyote. I mean, the sacred plants are really, really, really powerful. And so if you were to take ayahuasca, you are very likely to have a profound experience. But, we're not raised in a culture that necessarily, initiates or grows people into a person that is prepared for that type of experience. And so that experience could be really great, or it could be not so great. And I was thinking it's a little like putting an Amish person in the driver's seat of a Formula One race car. No offense to the Amish community, of course, but, you might have the experience of driving 200 miles an hour on a racetrack, or you might run it into the wall in the first turn. Yeah. So it's not without some risk. The second reason why we don't necessarily go that route is without proper training and initiation, if you have a profound positive experience, you might not know what to do with it. So let's say you're journeying on ayahuasca, and what the plant shows you is the ropes of light that connect every single thing in the universe. Like an incredibly profound experience to see something like that. And it might give you the feeling of how everything is connected, but you may not know what to do with that. You might not know, okay, how do I use those ropes? What can I do with them to improve my relationships or to improve my connection with spirit? So the experience itself may not land the way it's intended to land, even if it's a positive experience. And then lastly, you're sort of then reliant on the plant for that type of experience, that the only way you can reach that is with the plant. What we're intending to do, it's a slower route, but we're intending to be able to reach those experiences without the plant. So it sort of solves all of those problems. By the time you can reach those experiences, you've definitely built the personal power to handle those, your sort of physical and energetic and psyche. You are very likely to know what to do with those experiences, and at the very least, if not, you've developed a mentor who will guide you in that. And then you can have them when you need to have them, and you still have all of the training leading up to that. So, maybe I'm not trying to have a ayahuasca type journey, but maybe I'm needing to know, like I think I mentioned earlier, what plants to put in the ground, or why my tree isn't sort of doing so hot. And everything that you've learned along the way is helping you with those types of things as well. So that's a little bit of why it's not a part of my practice or the teachings. Again, there are lots of people who've had really incredible experiences, and I'm not certainly not knocking any of that as well. But
yeah. And so, for a lack of better way to describe it, your process, you said it takes a little bit longer than the ayahuasca. Is it primarily meditation, or what are some of the things that you do to help your clients get to that, or help yourself get to that point?
Yeah, I wouldn't be the one training anybody else to get to that point. If somebody was interested in those kinds of experiences, I'd direct them to my teacher. Gotcha. But yeah, it is training. It's essentially like learning to run an ultra marathon. And we don't necessarily do meditation, but there are things that we do that are similar-ish. That are intended to both sort of clear ourselves as a vessel and fill ourselves with enough power to be able to handle those experiences without blowing out.
Gotcha. And again, for anybody who's interested in learning more about this, Steve's website is thesacredtruth.com, and then I'm sure you probably have some kind of a link to your teacher from there, or can you give me her email address?
Yeah, and again, it's Marty Spiegelman, and it's Shaman's Light, Light, is the name of her program. But if for some reason you end up getting in contact with me first, I can certainly point you in the right direction.
Perfect. Cool. Yeah. So this stuff I love talking to you just in general about it, but there's never seems like an opportunity to really delve kind of deep into it. So what are you anticipating for yourself in terms of moving forward? What's kind of the next? Are there levels? What's sort of on your horizon through your training?
There sort of are levels in the beginning. There are 4 or 5 major initiations that in the Indian lineage that you receive to become what is called a mesa carrier, and that's somebody who primarily is working with the earth energies, although we absolutely work with the stars and things like that. After that point, it's really just mentoring, and there are certainly lots and lots of levels to explore. I'm doing a lot of dream work these days, so that's a really cool area that fairly recently has opened up for me, and a lot of work there. I'm certainly still and will always be focused on myself, focused on my relationship with the world of spirit, and really honing, how it is that I bring that to other people and utilize that in my Sacred Truth business.
Yeah. What do you mean focus on spirit? What does that mean? What are you? The
shamans have always been connected with the world of spirit. You alluded to it at the beginning, and we do that to achieve higher levels of consciousness or to receive information from higher levels of consciousness than we might otherwise be able to. And my teacher has a great metaphor. It's a little like the cloud in computing. So, we may not know exactly how the cloud in computing works, but we get the idea that out in the ether, there's this thing, this resource with all this great information in it. And somehow our computers can tap into it and help us, answer our Google questions or whatever it happens to be. It's essentially what we're trying to do with the world of spirit. There are levels of consciousness way, 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 way higher than human consciousness. And, as humans, we have lots and lots of things that we're trying to do. And some are, kind of ordinary, and some are big things, how we are contributing to the growth of consciousness, how we are contributing to solving things like the civil unrest and global warming and these big problems that we as a society are facing that, don't necessarily have any clear or simple answers. And so, the higher tuned you are, a little bit like a radio station, the better your antenna is, the more precise the information you can bring down to the earth, and the more effective you can be, in whatever it is that your, personal life is aimed towards.
And you just mentioned something else about kind of lately you've been doing a lot with dreams. Is that the reason why? I mean, is that where people are getting their ability to tap into those sorts of things, or what about the dreams are interesting to you, or that are important?
Dream is absolutely a very powerful place where we tap into levels of consciousness higher than our own, and it can be, and there is more than just, I had a dream about a snake, let me Google what that means. That we solve problems in the dreams. We come up with solutions, we grow, our psyche grows. And so being an active participant in the dream time is a really, really powerful way to grow yourself as a person, to grow whatever it is that you're currently focused on, whatever it is that's important to you. So yeah, that's definitely one of the practices that's really strong for me right now.
And so again, for a rock like me, I realize I wake up in the morning and I knew sometimes I've had some pretty intense dreams, right? But you wake up in the morning and you don't remember them at all. What for a guy like me that might be interested in trying to figure out what they mean, what's the recommendation? As soon as you have it and you wake up in the middle of the night, write it down, or
absolutely, yeah.
What are you supposed to do?
Definitely the journal by the bed. I have a little pen with an LED light right at the tip, so I don't wake up my wife. Yeah. It's good to write them down right away, because oftentimes by the time we go through a few more sleep cycles and wake up in the morning, it was like, oh, that was big, that felt important, and I don't really remember anymore. Or simply, or I should say, also, when you go to bed, intend to dream, intend to connect to your dreams. That both helps you increase sort of the power of the dream and the connection with the dream world, but it also, for people who say they may not dream much, or who don't remember their dreams, just going to bed with that intention helps you start to develop that skill.
Interesting. I love it. I'm going to start doing that because I've talked to other people who do that as well. And
share them with me when you have those big ones. I want to hear
down in the Cistern chapel.
We'll do it
in the pitch black while I'm freaking out. Again, kind of going back to that television show, and I might as well admit it now. It's the Ancient Aliens. I love that series. Anyway, and they had a great episode about shamans, and in it, the author Graham Hancock has been talking a lot about, and I believe this is his latest book. It's called Supernatural, where he talks a lot about how the ancients really were tapping into that spiritual world through natural chemical reactions like the ayahuasca. And it just seems like it's getting more and more popular, may not be the right word, but it just seems like a lot more people are interested in learning more about it. Is that your sense as well?
Yeah, I absolutely think that's true. And I think popular could be the right word. I mean, it's not the right word in, pop culture sense, but But I think people are feeling a real draw back to, you know, that core, true, ancient connection that, you know, like I mentioned our devices earlier. We really are getting further and further away from the earth. We're getting further and further away, I think, in a lot of ways from our connection to the mystery, to some power higher than ourselves. And I think we're seeing that in a lot of what's happening in the world. And I think consciousness is essentially calling people home. And we've gotten so far away that it's kind of a little whisper for a lot of us, but I think that's what's happening. And so I think the seeing and hearing the word shamans a lot more, and you know, we're being called back to the sort of core indigenous, you know, the 2 million year old self, as my teacher says, that lives within us and is wanting us to return to where we came from.
Yeah, no, I can definitely see that. And, you know, just using myself as an example, you know, I'm such a product of the modern world that even now, and I'm obviously nowhere near even, you know, being able to realize, even if something were to be happening around me, I probably wouldn't realize it. But I find myself staring up at the stars and be like, you know what, this is unbelievable. And just kind of reveling in all those things around us that are just so, for lack of a better word, awesome. I mean, just staring up at the night sky.
It is unbelievable, you know, and you know, without devices, without modern technology, without lights, I mean, that's the type of thing that sparked this gift in the indigenous people.
Yeah.
You know, it's a shame if somebody doesn't have the opportunity to stare up at the night sky and just be awestruck by it, because I mean, consciousness is remarkable. It's just truly remarkable. And you know, I think the hope is that, you know, we all in some way or another return to that experience, return to our childlike wonder of how miraculous everything truly is.
Yeah. Or as Crosby, Stills and Nash would say, we're stardust, we're children, and we got to get back to the garden.
Exactly.
All right. Hey, listen, we're coming up. We're just about at the end of our time, but I did want to ask you, one of the things I've, especially where I perceive myself to be, and then hearing where you are kind of in your journey along the path. And I definitely want to get back down into the Cistern of enlightenment. But if you want to, kind of what's been the most profound thing that you've kind of experienced through this active practice of trying to tap into that spiritual world? What's something that you might be able to kind of tell people?
Yeah. You know, I've said it before, and earlier, and you know, one of the things that shamans are defined by is their relationship to the spirit world. And, you know, we seek and build that relationship in all areas of our life and all the time. You know, the well, one of the intent I had behind the well was to grow that relationship. And so often when I'm in there, you know, what I'm trying to do is what I should say trying to do, what I am doing, is connecting with the spirit world. And, you know, they come, they absolutely come. And it's a profound experience. You know, just feeling presence like that, you know, it just puts the whole experience at a much more tangible level. And it, you know, like I said, it can be a little shocking for some, but it's important to know that these things are real. What we're doing is real, that what we're striving for is real, that these are not just things that are sparked in our imagination, that these connections are there, and they're there to support us, and they're there to empower us, and we're here to work with them, that it's a bilateral relationship and they're sort of wanting us as much as many of us are wanting them. Both
sides trying to reconnect after millennia of being separated.
For some cultures, there are plenty of cultures who that separation never happened. It's been as strong as ever. But where we tend to have been raised, it's much less present than it has been at times in our past, for sure.
I love it. I love it. All right, my man. Listen, that was awesome. Thank you very much for your time. Guys, this was my buddy Steve. And again, you can find Steve at thesacredtruth.com if you're interested in learning more about Steve's journey and how you might be able to get on that path as well. I will finish up by saying this. If you're in the military, the police, fire departments, or first responders, if that's you out there, thank you very much for your service. Please stay safe. And Steve, thank you again for your time.
Absolutely, my pleasure.
All right, guys, this is the Rain Man. Thanks for watching. Thanks for watching Rain Man's Take, Observations on the World We Live In. If you like the content, don't forget to hit the subscribe button below. You can also follow Rain Man's Take on Instagram at Rain Man's Take. Also, check out our website at www.rainmanstakepodcast.com and send your comments to rainmanstake@gmail.com. Keep an eye out for future podcasts, which will be coming out every Thursday at 5 p.m. West Coast time.